Hi, everyone, and welcome to journey number 11. And today I'm really excited to have Hannah Powley here. Hannah, how's your day going?
Good. I got my coffee ready to go.
Awesome. We were chatting a little bit before this and talking about how you've been in quarantine and counting down the days until you can finally leave and finally see people again. I think I'd be going a little bit crazy, but you seem to be doing good. So,
Yeah, I think it's all in your perspective, right? I chose to quarantine because I chose to travel for a work opportunity, so I knew that was gonna happen.
yeah,
It's all in how you see it. I've had extra time to focus on, like, I tend to let creative things take a back burner, and business entrepreneurial things kind of take like a lot of my focus. So I found being at home, I got to focus on a bit more of the creative side of things, which is always good because that makes me super happy. So
very cool. And super random, but just with you saying that, do you find ever that you need to be creative in like the more entrepreneurial business side of things, or for you are they really separate in your mind?
I think I imagine that it's probably different for different business owners, but
Mhm.
for me, when I notice a lack of um like happiness or feeling grounded, or the stress and the worry is starting to creep in and the negative self-talk, I find that it's usually because I'm not in touch with my creative side of things, and I'm focused too much on the business and the numbers and the like looking too far ahead. So I find I have to find a balance of both.
Yeah.
um but also like coaching as well as a part of that. Like there's the business, there's the coaching, and then there's like the creating. So it's hard to find a balance, but it's a work in progress every day for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really resonates with me, that like looking too far ahead, where I do that all the time. And whenever like I'm about to start something or I'm looking, I don't just like go a couple weeks or months ahead. I'm like, okay, when this is huge and there's millions of people doing it or like whatever it might be. And needing to pull myself back and kind of like reground and be like, yeah, that's great. And it's good to have that foresight. And at the same time, trying to actually stay grounded with what's happening right now and not get too ahead of myself. Is there,
It's tough. it's
yeah,
it it's I think it's something that we will always work on
yes.
as humans.
Yeah. And just because I'm curious, like for that creative side, when you said that you like getting in touch with it and it kind of helps you, bring you back and center you, are there specific outlets that you've found like over your life that you typically go back to for that creative output? Or is it trying new things or, more of just like a general like genre of things? Or, how does that work for you?
That's a great question. I think it's changed over time. Like I used to see being creative as like being artsy, and like I do love art, and I like to paint and I like to draw and all of those things, and I always have, but I always saw it as this like singular thing. But I think being creative, what that means to me now, and I may be going off from your question here, but
Oh,
what
that's
that means to me now is like kind of going inside myself. So like I find often being a business owner that you can really get stuck in like your masculine um characteristics, and that's kind of how I am anyway because I grew up in a rugby club. So um,
yeah.
so I find like when I say creative, what I mean is like I'm getting in touch with myself and like moving my body in creative ways and being introspective and writing. So I'd say my favorite things are probably dancing. Like I will just dance in my basement, which sounds probably crazy, but it's like it's getting in tune with yourself, right? Like dancing or writing. Um, I find I will often put off writing, and then as soon as I write, I just have this like sense of like I just feel so powerful and like great. And for some reason I get when I'm attached in like my business mindset,
Mhm.
that stuff lacks. So and sometimes maybe like doing something a bit crazy, like
Okay.
doing something new, I would call that creative as well. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
It sure does. That's awesome. I love hearing that. And just kind of touching on something that you said too, because I think it came up in your conversation with the King of Hearts with Nuke. Talking about that like feminine and masculine energy, right?
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a newer, just call it topic for myself of, looking at it in the way that, masculine doesn't necessarily mean male and, vice versa for feminine. And we
Mm.
all have both aspects and we can both lean into one or the other. And it's important to be in touch with both. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say maybe for some people, being really in touch with your masculine side. And can you talk a little bit about your journey with that and like when kind of some consciousness came around that and how it's maybe shifted or changed over the last little while?
Yeah, I really love this topic. I think that these concepts came to me. I think they're a part of like a self-healing journey, right? Like realizing, okay, who am I? What is my purpose in life? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to be surrounded by? I feel like you have to really get clear on those things. Um, and then these concepts start to kind of come to light for you. So I realized like my purpose is to help women and in the online space with feeling empowered to be able to live life at the highest level possible with mindset, health, and fitness strategies. So I realized, like, once I realized this and I really dove into it, I realized that I was very detached from my feminine side. Like, I had this kind of like hard exterior, and I was like, I don't need anybody. And I still sometimes get in that mindset. I don't need anybody. It's me out for myself, and um having this opinion that like you have to be hard to be good at business.
Mhm.
um and I realized that like I was very disconnected from my feminine side, which could be due to relationships I had or the way I grew up, like who knows.
Yeah.
But what I found is that like even looking at the color pink, I'd be like, ugh.
Yeah.
I oh, pink is so girly and feminine and
Yeah.
whatever. And I don't know if you've noticed this about me, but I put pink all over my posts, and
Yeah.
that's kind of like me forcing myself to embrace it,
Hmm.
which lots of people probably wouldn't know by looking. They're probably just like, "Oh, she likes pink." I actually don't like pink. I'm making myself like pink. But I realized like, okay, what do I need to do to get in touch more with my feminine side? So I started by, I think the first thing I did when I wasn't really clear on exactly the differences,
Hmm.
I just started complimenting women every day. Like I'd see a random woman and I'd compliment her, and I'd be like, oh, that feels really good. Um, because I found growing up that I always got along better with men. Like I always got along better with males. Or my best friend growing up was a guy.
Yeah.
Um, I always got along really well with guys. So I realized that was where I had to start, was like being more open to women around me. And then once I did some learning just with myself on like the differences between the feminine and the masculine. And I've done a lot of reading as well on how that impacts you as a female business owner as well.
Okay.
So I realized like, okay, the feminine is like more of your nurturing, creative, strong, empowering side. And then your masculine is more of your like black and white, um, numbers focused, maybe not so and that this it's not a negative thing. Like the masculine traits are not a negative thing in any way. Like you need to be able to tap into both. But I realized when I was looking into this, okay, I'm definitely more on that masculine side.
Yeah.
So the more I can kind of balance things out, then the better coach I'm going to be. I'm going to be more open and there for my family and my friends. And um it's a very long-winded answer, but I think just kind of self-learning and
Yeah.
just going along my journey and figuring things out for myself. I would honestly really like to dive into a bit more of the psychology of this stuff, but
Yeah.
need the time for it. So
For sure. No, and I love that answer, and I think that's great context. And a couple things that kind of stood out for me, and one of the first ones is what is such like a quote unquote simple action of
Mm,
forcing yourself to put pink everywhere and wear pink and whatever it might be, even though you don't actually like it. Sometimes from the outside looking in, somebody might be like, well, that seems so small, so insignificant. But a lot of times it's not necessarily the action. I find it's the mental block and the mental exercise of doing it, right?
mhm,
And like, so what came up for me is, I've always struggled with the idea of perfection. This idea that I have to be perfect for people to like me, for people to love me, etc. And so for me, a tiny little thing was disagreeing with somebody, even on insignificant things, or like saying that I don't like something that they like, right? Which again, from the outside looking in seems like such a small thing of like, I don't want to eat there, right? Like, I don't want to have that tonight for dinner, something like that. But for me, that mental hurdle is actually huge. And kind of getting those reps in and training yourself to accept those things that, you've naturally pushed against, to help with growth. The other thing was just kind of backing up a little bit because I'm super curious. One thing that I've really been trying to figure out and dive into, and try to pick people's brains whenever they come on, is that idea of purpose and finding your purpose. So kind of two parts of what started that journey for you. When you started diving into, like improving yourself, challenging maybe your old beliefs, and how did you come to the realization around your purpose?
another awesome question. It sounds very foo-foo, but I can only describe it as this like light bulb epiphany period where I just started to I'm a self-proclaimed people pleaser, and I have been since a very young age. And I realized that I think the way that I realized my purpose was filtering out the things that I had said yes to that didn't feel right in my gut and my
Okay.
heart, my head. So like as I was going through this journey of like, especially when I started my business, like you just say yes to all of these things. Um, and I think being my own boss and like owning a business has propelled me on this journey. I'm not sure how long it would have taken if I didn't do this, but we won't even go there. Um, so as I was filtering out these things that I had been saying yes to just for the sake of saying yes and people pleasing, as I filtered those things out, I realized like what was for me and what wasn't. And I think on that journey, like for example, I was very close to looking at like owning a gym, and I realized that I didn't want to do that, and it just didn't feel right in my gut, which probably took me way too long. Because it got to the point of like we were going to go ahead and do this, and then I realized like, okay, this isn't for me. And again, you can never apologize for the time that it takes for you to figure these things out. They just happen and it happens. But I realized like, okay, I don't really care as much as I thought I did about just training people for rehab.
Hmm.
Like there's so much more and there's so much opportunity. And I think just listening to your gut and your heart and your head, like when things are not in line. And I think the more that I like meditated and the more that I got in tune with my body and myself and started to love myself more, I was able to hear it louder, like if things were in line. And then always coming back to like, what is my vision? Like once I figured out what my vision was, then I could ask myself, like, is this in line with it? No. Is this in line with it? Yes. Is this in line with it? No. And then it also makes you much more unapologetic about saying no to certain things. So I think my biggest journey has been like showing myself that when I listen to these things and I make sure that I'm in line with my decisions and that they properly reflect my vision and my purpose, then I'm always going to be right for myself.
Love that. That's awesome. And It's one of the biggest lessons that I've been trying to learn over the last little while. And one of my big realizations is, trusting that gut feeling. Because I feel like you said, a lot of times, when something's not aligned or when it feels off, right? And there's no other really word for it other than it just like feels wrong, or like my gut's telling me that I should or should not do that.
You
And
just know, you
yeah,
just feel it.
yeah.
It's this feeling that you can't even really explain, right? But
Exactly, yeah, and I think that my problem a lot of times was that my head would overwrite that, right? And I would say
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I shouldn't feel this way," right? And so I'll actually go and do this, even though it wasn't, my body was telling me no. I would go, "No, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to override it. I'm going to do it anyways." And that's, I would say, I've really been trying to minimize regret, that feeling of regret, because it brings a lot of, dwelling and negative connotation and thoughts around things. And so I've been trying to minimize it. But I would say a lot of times over the last while, that's been my only regrets, are those times when I did not listen to my body. And so making that conscious decision going forward of, when
Mhm.
I feel that, I need to listen to it and I need to trust it.
That's so true. Like what you said about being too in your head. I
Yeah.
think that like what I was saying earlier about like the creative things,
Hmm.
I have found that the more that you do these things that ground yourself, like meditation and getting out in nature and yoga, like movement of body, but not like harsh, aggressive movement, like
Yeah.
flow movement. And like the more that you can get into that flow state, I feel like the less your head takes over in your decision making. So I feel like that's another thing too. Like I always thought meditation was this like foo-foo weird thing.
Yeah.
And then, oh, sorry,
That's
getting
okay.
a phone call there. um, I always thought that meditation was this foo-foo thing that like was just a bunch of BS. And then once I started to just really dive into it and um, work on it every single day, then I started to realize like, oh, okay, this isn't foo-foo. Like this actually helps me get out of my own head.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part as well.
And just for my own curiosity, like, how did you start meditating? Do you use an app? Was it like a guided thing? Because I did go through a period actually during the quarantine where I was meditating basically every night and just kind of, self-guided, no real time limit, no, nothing like that, not a ton of structure. And I really liked it. And I've kind of fallen off of it. And so I'm just curious, are you more guided, more self-guided? Do you use any tools? Was it just like making it a habit, so that you always do it?
Yeah, when I started with the Headspace app.
Hmm.
I also used Calm a couple of times. That's another app that's really good. I when I started, I used guided meditation, and I would only do like I think I started at 2 minutes, and 2 minutes felt like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I started with like 2 to 5 minutes and just made it a consistent habit. And then the more I did it, the more I thought like I didn't really get much from that.
Hmm.
So then I dove into longer meditations that were guided, but also they would take you to these deeper levels of like introspection. So I really, for the ladies that are listening, or even the guys, Rising Woman is a Instagram account, and they also have these guided meditations on their website, and they're fantastic. They have like an inner child one, an inner goddess one, and I would start to do these meditations that were like 15 to 20 minutes long with visualization.
Hmm.
And then once I kind of got into that deeper meditation, I then found like now, if I feel stressed or anxious, I can just drop down on the floor here and like put a little song on and just like meditate
Very cool.
unguided.
Yeah.
Um, so it small steps, stay consistent with it and do it every day. The only wrong way to do it is to not do it. Just do it every day
Yeah.
and then you'll get better over time.
Very cool. And I'm curious, and this might seem like a weird question, just because I don't think it's something that's talked about a ton. And you said one of them is the inner child, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just more curious if you've done a lot of that inner child work because, over call it the last year where I've really, put a lot of time and effort into this, personal development, mental health kind of side of things, that has actually been a huge one for me is
Mhm.
repairing that inner child. And a really interesting, call it like exercise that my therapist gave me was going back like in my brain and being the role model that young Jared needed at the time and like telling him what he needs to hear and like sometimes and it sounds like so crazy when I say it out loud but like sometimes going in my brain giving like young Jared a hug or something right or telling him that I love him and something like that and so
Mhm.
it's been a really interesting like journey exercise trying to repair that relationship with my inner child. I'm just curious if you've done any of that sort of work.
Yeah, I actually have done a lot of the visualizing yourself at a certain age. Like you'll just know what age it is that you need to visualize. It'll if you do meditation and you're in touch with those things, like it will come to you. So I've done a lot of the like visualizing myself at this age and giving myself a hug and telling myself it's okay, like meditations like that. And then also I've reflected on like I think the biggest thing is just reflection. So like I find people will often say that inner child work is only for the children that have experienced trauma.
Mhm.
And when we think of trauma, we think of this like big explosive crazy life altering thing, but you can have like trauma from um, maybe one person said something to you in high school and you don't realize that the impact that it had on you, and it might be seem like this small insignificant thing, but it took you down this path. So I feel like a big thing is like reflecting on what happened to me throughout my growth as a person, and then what narrative did I form based on these things. So like
Yeah.
why do I feel like I have to please everybody? Because I feel the biggest thing for me was figuring out that I am all I really need is myself. Um, and I find that realization has allowed me to stop people pleasing as much. So it's like doing that reflection and figuring out like where was I, what was the path that took me to believing this.
Mhm.
You have to reflect before you can change things. You have to be aware before you can change. So I feel like the biggest thing with that inner child work is just figuring out like, I mean, even for the ladies listening, like as a woman, I realized like from a very young age, all we're told is that, or the majority of what we're told is grow up, get a husband that has lots of money and can take care of you, have babies. And there's so much more to life than that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's another example of like something that you would reflect on. Okay, this is something that I was told from a young age because of society, not just because of parents or specific people.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not necessarily the truth. And I can actually form my own path.
Yeah. I love that. And yeah, just what came up for me was a saying that I've really tried to tell myself because I also have had, people pleasing tendencies really badly. And for me, it was like self-worth centered, right? And so the thing I always try to come back to is you are enough because you are you, right? Like you don't need to prove it to anybody. You don't need to look for outside validation. Like you are good enough because you are you, and that's all you need to be.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and then it's so funny that you bring up trauma because randomly it's piqued my interest recently. And that idea that trauma doesn't necessarily need to be one super huge event that we typically look at, right? And it's also led to a little bit of call it like imposter syndrome of reading through trauma and people that have been called diagnosed or experienced trauma and really resonating with a lot of the things that they say and feel and their experiences and stuff like that but feeling like well that can't be right because I didn't go through a singular call it super traumatizing event that people typically define it as, right? Like I've gone through traumatizing events, but always feeling like, well, they're not traumatizing enough, right? And yeah, so funny enough, like I hate reading books. I can't do it. But because of my curiosity, it has actually sparked my interest. And I'm reading, I think it's called The Body Keeps the Score right now. So yeah, so no, really interesting topic that I'm digging into.
Yeah, I love what you said about self-worth. I actually did, I have a podcast with my girlfriend Jamie, and we both did our own individual episodes just talking about our journey, and I called it Journey to Self-Worth. So it's funny that you said that.
Well,
But what I see self-worth as is like, I am worthy of respect, I am worthy of success, I am worthy of all these things because I know I am, not because other people tell me I
yeah,
am. So it's funny that you said that.
yeah, love that. So backing up a little bit, kind of going down a little bit of a different road. So I guess, first of all, explain exactly what it is you're doing now, because I know you're doing some coaching, some, fascial stretch, stuff like that. But I believe I saw that you used to work a corporate job and you made a big decision to leave that and kind of pursue, call it your passions or your purpose, like you were talking about before. So can you talk to us? Yeah. So first, just some context on, like what exactly you're doing right now, and then how you got to that point, and one, mustering the courage to actually leave it. And was it, one day you just woke up, you're like, okay, I need to do this? Or was it a gradual build up of, feeling that disconnect? Just kind of going into that.
Yeah, so I'll start with what I do now. So right now, my bread and butter is the online coaching. So I work with women specifically, and I work with them on mindset, nutrition, exercise, stress management, lots of times even relationships with
Yeah.
themselves and with other people. So I really, really, really am working on not detesting the word life coach or the
Yeah.
description life coach,
Yeah.
but I really am coaching the ladies in all areas of life, because I realized if I give you an exercise program and a nutrition plan, and your mind is a total mess, and your confidence is so low, and you are extremely stressed and living on autopilot, you're not going to get the results that you need to get, and you're not going to show up to do these things. So I realized, like, I went through a phase of like, why aren't people getting results, and like really diving into why especially women struggle so much with like the roller coaster of weight fluctuations and confidence fluctuations and all of these and hormonal issues. And I realized, like, the reason that we have these fluctuations is because we start and then we stop, and then we start and then we stop. So my favorite type of client is like the clients that know what they need to do, but they just can't do it. And they really need someone to help them exercise, not just exercise, but exercise like control, taking control of their life.
Mm-hmm.
So I really coach my clients on things like daily routines, journaling, food journaling, and like understanding, why do I have this emotional attachment to food, or why do I have this emotional attachment to the scale, and all of those things. I found that the more I coach on that, the other stuff just falls into place, and the exercise program is just a thing. Like, I can give anyone an exercise program,
Yeah.
but it's my job to ensure that you're following it. And in order for you to follow it and have a good relationship with food and yourself and all of these things, then we have to implement these things. And lots of times I'm just coaching habits, like, okay, let's have you drink 3 liters of water a day for the next 6 weeks. And I need you to check it off in the app every day, so I know you did it, because it takes 90 days for us to establish a habit. Okay, you've got that. Okay, now let's add journaling, or now let's add taking vitamins, like whatever it is. I would say if I could sum it up, like what I really help women do is take the stress out of health and fitness and just appreciate the journey versus like the end result.
Mhm.
Um, I find when we just focus on the end result, like I want to be this body fat percentage, or I want to do this, or I want to um, look good for this vacation. When we attach ourselves to the end result, the journey doesn't have the consistency that it needs to have. So, um, yeah, I would say I help inconsistent women get consistent.
Yeah, and actually, just to jump in really quick, because a couple things in there really just resonated with me, and it's something I've been talking about a little bit over the last while. And really, what it comes down to is the connection between the mental and physical side, right? And how disconnected I thought they were, and the new realization of, you need both sides of it. And for me, it showed up a lot in like body image issues and stuff like that as well. And it's so funny where it's, so I used to play football. I played football for 8 years, and I worked out a ton. However, I never really saw the results that I wanted. And I realized looking back of how lacking my mental side was, is that I would go into the gym scared every single day. Right. And, again, that self worth coming up, stuff like that of, I'm weak, I'm, not as big as the other guys. And so, going into a workout with that mindset would hold me back, and I would almost self sabotage as well. Right. The other big one for me, and, that connection and attachment to the scale has been huge, where, and how that ties into body image is I've gone through two pretty extreme weight losses in my life. Right. So, I think the first one was in 2013. I lost about 50 pounds. And then this last one has been over the last year. I've lost about 40 pounds. And the interesting part was that I realized I did not view myself in the mirror any differently than I did when I was at the heaviest or when I was at the lightest.
Mhm.
Because, body image is a lot more actually how you feel about your body and not how it actually looks. Right.
Exactly.
And so going down that route of, looking at some of, fitness influencers or competitors and hearing them talking about body image, I would always look at them and push against that and be like, no, you're not allowed to have body image issues. Look at how you look. Right. Because there's that missing piece. Because in my mind, I saw them and said, that's what I would want to look like, but not realizing that it's actually all mental, right? And so for me, this last time, it was I have maybe stepped on a scale, call it like 3 times over the last year, right? And it's funny, if even when I do, that old programming starts coming up. Of the last time I did, I saw like the actual number and how much I'd lost, and I went, that old programming went like, no, 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 this isn't what you are. Like, you need to start eating more, right? Like, you need to get back to fulfill that, old story in your head. And so, yeah, it's been very interesting. And working on the mental side of myself has actually led to so much physical gains. It's been crazy. And so, just that whole, everything that you said there resonated a ton.
Yeah, it's all about appreciating the journey instead of the outcome, right? Like if we just attach ourselves to the outcome, then we lose sight of what's in front of us.
Yeah.
Like, and I really try to encourage the ladies that I work with to focus on today only, right? Like what, just focus on today, be here now, focus on the work,
Hmm.
and the result will come. Um,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to like decondition that programming when you have done it. Like some people have done it for the past 50 years of their life, so it takes a lot of um, reflection and internal work. And as a coach, if you're going to really dive into this stuff, like you really have to dive into it, because I have to have that mentality of like, okay, no, Brenda, I'm not gonna, that's just a random name I made up. I don't have a client named Brenda, but okay, Brenda, I'm not going to stop telling you these things because I need you to see this, because I know that this is the answer to you really having the happiness that you want to have with yourself. So It's not just one of those things like mindset. The reason I talk about it 98% of the time in my content and with my clients is because it really is the answer. Like if we can fix the mind, then the body will follow.
Yeah.
The body will always give signs of what's going on in the mind. Like I was extremely stressed a couple weeks back and I threw my back out. And that was a result of my mind. Like it's crazy how much they're attached, but and guys need to talk more about that experience because I find women talk about it a lot, but the more that guys share, like everybody goes through body image and body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
And I think just the more we talk about it, the more that people will kind of wake up to the fact that the way that you look outwardly is not a reflection of who you are inwardly.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that, and it's something that I've really been trying to embody in my own life, of focusing on that process and on the habits and not the results, right?
Yeah.
Of like, I'm going to focus on exercising regularly and eating healthy, and that is my goal. Weight loss or definition, whatever it might be, are kind of a consequence of that, right? But if you don't tie your goal to that, then you can develop those healthy habits which last longer, right? So I love that. So yeah, and then I guess just backing up on that, that experience going from that corporate job into this new world that you find yourself in.
Yeah, it's crazy because it feels like I'm in a different lifetime. It's kind of nuts, but
Yeah.
I think what triggered my decision to leave the corporate world was I was in a relationship where I was with somebody who had a child, and
Okay.
I kind of took on this stepmother role. And I also was in a position in the company I was in where I was managing many trainers, and it felt impossible. I was given this club that had gone through a lot of turmoil, and I felt like I was putting all of this energy and effort into it and not getting anything in return. So my stress was extremely high. I was probably eating like 800 calories a day, maybe,
Mm.
as well as dealing with or being in a relationship where I was kind of in the middle of like a custody battle and trying to provide for this little human, and not feeling super supported, and like I was doing a lot of the work, and I was just a total stress case. Like I lost about 15 pounds in a couple of months. I was basically a shell of myself. Like I would roll out of bed, which is, I can't believe this was me, but I would roll out of bed with like 5 minutes to spare. And then I would grab a coffee. Or if I didn't have time for a coffee, I would go and get an extra large coffee that was like the strongest possible caffeine content. And then I would roll into work. I was missing my workouts. I wouldn't eat. I was just this ball of stress. And I eventually one day, I don't know what happened, but I woke up. I was living with this person, which is a really hard thing, a hard decision to make, especially with a kid involved. But I woke up one day and I just asked myself, like, if I continue to go down this path that I'm on, where am I even going? Like, and I just was envisioning, like, I could just see this path that I was going on, and it just made me feel like sick to my stomach. So the first step I took was removing myself from the relationship. And I think that was a trigger for me to also make the decision to leave the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, well, I've made this decision. I've moved out of my apartment. I'm living with my parents. I might as well just do this. Like, I might as well just do it. And I had been thinking about owning my own business since I was like 16 or 17. Like, I remember thinking about it. And I just realized, like, if I'm going to do this at any time, I'm just going to do it while I have the support of my parents and I really have nothing to lose. Like if I don't make any money for a while, like I'll figure it out. Like I don't care. Like I'm so unhappy, I will figure it out.
Yeah.
So I just did it. I gave 1 month notice to the corporate company. And then I just jumped in with not really any plan or idea of where I wanted to take my business. All I knew that was that I had been a trainer for 8 years and I like had lots of good education and I knew how to train people. And then clients started coming and I started doing one-on-one because that was again saying yes, saying yes, saying yes. So I had a lot of one-on-one, a lot of FST, which is fascial stretch therapy.
Mm.
And I did that for a couple months and I still didn't feel happy. And I still felt like I was just kind of swimming in the deep end without any direction.
Yeah.
And I decided to hire 2 business coaches. My one coach, Steve, has seriously changed my life and really helped me like tap into who I'm really supposed to be.
Yeah.
He asks me all the right questions. He empowers me to just like be unapologetic about what I want, which I really needed. And I found, I just started saying no to things that didn't feel right. Self-healing journey helped me with that, meditating, working on loving myself, affirmations. The more that I dove into that, the more I felt more confident with moving forward with what I really wanted. And then when COVID happened, I was like, okay, this is the moment where I either just leave the industry or I say fuck it and I just do what I really want to do, which is be an online coach for women.
Okay.
So then I did this post and I was like, I'm looking for 5 women who want this, 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 and this. And I filled the spots and then I just put everything into those women and I lost pretty much all my income from the one-on-one because of COVID. And I just started to build my online space and put all of my energy into it. And I just was so in love with it. And I just knew, like, I just felt this sense of happiness. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then as things started to open back up, I really asked myself questions and like, do I really want to, like, I could take on this one-on-one person and make a good amount of money, but is that taking away from my purpose or is it serving my purpose? Okay, it's taking away from my purpose. I don't want to do one-on-one. I don't want to do it. So I then started like just being really intentional with things that I picked up and didn't. And that allowed me to just put all of my time into my online coaching and the systems that I use and learning more about the mind and all of that stuff. So, and now I'm here.
That's so cool. And I love that story. And, when you're talking about it, how much do you think, when you got to that point where you're just like, fuck it, I got to do it because I don't, like, if I'm going to do it, I need to do it now. How much do you think the fear of regret played into that? Of regretting not trying it, of like waking up one day in 5-10 years and being like, I really wish I would have tried pursuing that. Do you think that it was regret, and was that conscious at the moment, or was it something else, or was it just I have nothing to lose, I might as well try it?
I don't think it was fear of regret because I'm not generally a person that lives in fear.
Mm-hmm.
My flaw is that I get comfortable.
Okay.
And I just accept what is. And I did that for way too long, which is why I got myself in that position. And I just realized, like, it's so hard to explain. I just have always had this feeling of where I can go. And I feel like I think even if I do what I'm doing till I'm like 100, I probably still won't be happy with what I've done because I feel like it's just much, much bigger than that.
Yeah.
But I think it was more like, I see what I'm capable of. Why the hell aren't I doing it? kind of thing. Like if
Yeah.
I don't do it, I'm wasting my life, and I'm probably not going to live much longer because I'm probably going to be extremely unhappy with myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to explain, but
No, I understand that a ton. And it was a question by my therapist that kind of stopped me dead in my tracks and really changed the way that I look at things. And she asked me, she said, okay, at this time, if you never achieve anything else in your life, would you be successful? And I was so confused by the question because objectively, I could go, well, I've achieved this, I've achieved this, I've achieved this. Like for other people looking in, like they would say that's successful. And I know objectively I could say that's successful. However, inside of me, I was like, no, like I have so much more to achieve. I have so much more to do. Like if I never achieved anything else, I'd be super unhappy. And those complete opposite sides of the spectrum really threw me for a loop. And, it was something that I reflected on for a long time. And yeah, helped me kind of work things out in my brain. And so I felt compelled to share that. The other thing I wanted to just pick up on was, which I think is so important, and is kind of that piece that a lot of people don't talk about, where you said you could do one-on-one coaching and make a lot more money from that one person. However, you're so much happier doing what you do now. And like you were saying, like there's that almost that unmeasurable toll that it can take on us when we're doing something that we're not supposed to be doing, or something that we don't enjoy, of not wanting to get up in the morning, not eating properly, missing out on the things that we love and want to do, like working out, or however it shows up in other people, being around friends, whatever it might be. And I think that was, again, one of the big factors that led to me making big changes in my life. Was I know I'm comfortable here. I know that, from the outside looking in, there's a lot of, I don't know what the right word is. I want to say like prestige, which sounds, like not the best word, but yeah. But realizing in my mind and in my soul, I was not happy and I needed to make these changes, and with no idea what I was going to do. I'm also very extreme. So I made a big change as well, walked away from everything, kind of started over at zero, still figuring out where I'm going. But even though I don't have all those external factors, internally, I'm in such a better place, and it's opened me up. And I do truly believe that because of that, I'll be able to achieve more as well. And kind of playing to both sides of that in the long run, right? Not just looking in the short term. So
yeah, it's so hard to not see dollar signs as well in life. Like we attach happiness to money, which money does provide freedom and peace and happiness for sure. But money doesn't mean anything if you're not happy with yourself and what you're doing. And there's this quote from Jim Carrey.
okay.
And you've probably heard it. And he talks about how he says, I wish everybody could be rich so that they could understand that it's not the key to happiness. And I would say I'm living in abundance with where I'm at financially and business wise and whatever, but it's still not enough. And it's not enough because I haven't made enough money because I want to make so much money.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I want to help more people. And money is a byproduct of that. And obviously that keeps growing, but it's more about like, what's your purpose? And I think if you really follow your purpose, you might experience a time period where you're not really getting much from it financially. But if you really dive into it, then the universe will give you back what you put in.
Yeah.
Whether that's relationships, whether it's money, whether it's the things and circumstances that happen to you. I'm a big believer that you get back what you put in. So yeah. I think you can never ever go wrong with just doing what feels right.
Yeah, I love that and resonate a ton and think it's so important. Something that I want to touch on, I just want to make sure that we get to it, is when I first started following your content, one of the things that I actually really loved was your style of coaching and way of going about things. And we kind of touched on it of, one, the mental side of it, two, the healthy habits and creating those habits. And when I see a lot of, call them like fitness accounts or whatever they might be, a lot of it's very flashy, call it, right? And very like, get ripped in 30 days, or, like, here's the 6 week 6 pack package that I'm selling, right? And realizing that a lot of people are selling quick fixes that either don't work a lot of times or aren't sustainable, right? Whereas I feel like you come at it from a very, healthy standpoint where it's, let's create these habits, let's create these things that, sometimes they aren't mainstream, but they're better for you, and they will make you healthier, mind, body, soul. And so I was just kind of curious, is that how you've always approached things? Was it going back to what we talked about earlier, where you just saw how important that mental side of it was? And just kind of what made you make that decision on your style? And was it a conscious decision, or is it just how you've always done things?
That's a great question. I think I've always been this way as a trainer, coach, manager, whatever. But I was living this like hypocrite life where I knew that it was necessary and I would preach it, but I wasn't actually living it.
Yeah.
Obviously, based on what I told you where I was. I knew that through working with people that experienced a lot of pain, I knew that their mind was creating pain. And I knew that when people stretched more, their stress was lower. And I recognized these things, and I was never really that trainer ever that was like, let's focus on giving you a 6 pack. And like, I would always struggle and have this like struggle and battle with clients at the corporate company I was in, because they only cared about the quick fix and they only cared about the end result. And I always was so unhappy and so frustrated with conversations, because I was like, why do people think this way? And when I started to just kind of live it more myself, I think I felt more comfortable to just share it.
Yeah.
So I think that answers your question.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've always felt that way, but when I really started to live it, and also I think because I show that I live it,
Mhm.
like when I share content where I'm showing that I do these things, I think it empowers people to trust it more,
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, well, she's doing those things. She's not just saying it. I think a big part of getting people's buy-in on this way of looking at health and fitness is showing them that you practice what you preach and you're not just here for a 6 pack or.
Yeah. I love that. I know we're running out of time here, but there is something else that I do want to touch on, because I think it's very interesting, and maybe specifically because it's very opposite to what I experienced growing up. Because I think you made a post where you said you've moved 30 times. Is that
Probably more than that,
okay?
to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. And so, like, for me, I lived in the exact same house with my parents until I moved out for the first time. Right. And so, not only like same city, but like specifically same house. And so it just makes me curious. And I guess if you could do like a really quick, like, some of the places you've been and lived, um, and just like, do you think, how you think that it affected you, like good, bad, like your experiences with it? Do you think you developed certain skills because of it? Yeah, just kind of a general conversation on it.
That's a really cool question that no one asks me. So I'm glad to talk about this. So I was an army brat. Um,
Okay.
my dad was always in the military, and we moved based on what was happening with his career. And my mum always worked. My mum has always been a hard worker and very successful, but based her work on kind of, we followed what my dad was doing. So we moved every like 2 years, I would say, in the UK, just throughout the UK.
Hmm.
And then when I was 12, my dad had the opportunity to either go to Cyprus or Canada. And we talked about it as a family and decided that we want to move to Canada. And it was supposed to only be for 2 years. So I should have really left Canada when I was 14, but we decided to stay. And I've stayed in Canada since. But I still have continued this pattern of moving frequently.
Okay.
Ever since I moved out of my parents' house, like since the age of 18, I have moved like once a year. And I think it's probably because the pattern is ingrained in me where I'm like terrified of settling. I'm terrified of settling in one place. Even now, like when the world opens up, I'm probably going to go live somewhere for a year because I think that pattern may have just been ingrained in me, which I think has its positives and negatives. The positive is I can talk to anyone. Like uh, the other day, I was raking my leaves and I talked to the old lady next door for like 40 minutes, probably because I was a bit lonely because of quarantine. But
Yeah.
a positive is that I can talk to anyone. A positive also is that I would describe myself as kind of a chameleon. Like I can really just get along with any type of people. And I was always that person in high school where I never belonged to one group of people. Like I was an athlete, I was an artist, I was a bit of an emo. Like I belonged to all of those groups.
Yeah.
So I think that is also a byproduct, is like being able to chameleon yourself to whoever you're around. I would say maybe the cons are that, and I've discovered this on my journey of like understanding myself more. I definitely struggle with long-term commitment to things,
Hmm.
as well as like opening up my energy to people. As much as I give off this like fun, I'm really listening to you, like confident kind of exterior, I don't like to, like my circle is very, very small. So that also, I guess, though, could be seen as a positive. Um, I think that answers your question.
Very cool. And I have a very possibly out there question, and you might not have an answer to it, which is more than okay. So I guess so. Sharing on my side, in grade 2, I moved schools. So like that was a big move for me, right? And so middle of elementary, being the new kid was extremely difficult, right? And so for me, it led to being bullied a lot, um, not really having any friends for that first year. Until you kind of get accepted, you're not the new kid anymore, right? And a lot of times you have to almost call it like harden yourself because of it. And I'm just curious if you've ever thought about, do you think maybe one of the reasons why you used to lean a lot more into that masculine energy was because you were going into those environments where sometimes maybe kids weren't super receptive to you and you had to have that strength and show that strength? Do you think that might have played into it at all?
Potentially, yeah. I think when you constantly meet new people, like I never was in a situation where I was bullied, thankfully, or anything like that. But I was also very good at like projecting like what people need. Like I said, like that chameleon kind of personality, and not getting too attached to certain people and their opinions of me, because I was almost detached in a way, because I knew like, oh, well, I'm probably going to move anyway and what have you, which probably um, fueled like my masculine fire for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. No, again, super random question. It just kind of came up as you're talking there.
Mhm.
So the final question I have for you is, what does this next phase of your journey look like?
Ooh, great question. I think for me, I always think of business because my business is my life, clearly. Um, for me, I'm working on scaling my business
Okay.
currently and what that looks like. When I say scaling, what I mean is how can I create opportunities to pay. So I have one person working for me and I would like to keep it that way. Her name is Rachel. She's a queen. God sent her to me. I'm working on ways that like I can pay Rachel more and I can pour more into her and I can create more abundance in my business, but without completely stretching my energy in all different ways.
Mhm.
So in terms of business, working on scaling and just being myself always when I share content and just like really leaning into like who I really am, because I still get resistant to it when I share content, talking about hard things. And in terms of personal, I think just always diving into like the self-healing journey and understanding myself more, and really leaning into women around me that also are business owners and have the same mindset and just like really attracting that.
Mhm.
Luckily, in the past few months, I have found a really awesome group of women that are very similar to me in those ways. So, yeah, just
Awesome.
staying open, being more open, doing more good for people. My favorite quote is Kobe. I love Kobe. I'm a diehard Kobe fan. He always says the work is the dream, or he said the work is the dream. And I'm a big believer of that. Like, I don't really ever attach myself to like an end result,
Yeah.
but also reminding myself that what I am doing is great and reflecting on how far I've come, because I can often get in that mindset of like, well, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. So
Yeah.
yeah, just continuing on the journey and changing the world.
Awesome. I love that so much. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait to see what the future holds. And for people that are looking to connect or find you, where would be the best place? What are the handles? Everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, you can find me at Lift with Hannah, LAFT with Hannah. I have a ton of content on mindset, workouts, mobility, um, body image, relationship with food, all of those things. I also have a podcast. It's called Thoughts of the Day podcast, where I do talk about a lot of the topics that we talked about today, specific to women and health and fitness. And then I have a website, liftwithhannah.ca, where you can figure out like what programs I offer and how you can look at coaching with me. If it is something that you're interested in after this podcast, um, also just send me a DM, because I love to just chat with people. It's my favorite thing. It's really what I try to use Instagram for instead of scrolling. Um, and then I also just released a nutrition ebook. It will be out on Monday, where people can purchase it along with a webinar on taking the stress out of nutrition. So that's another product that I have as well. So yeah, look me up, see what you think, reach out to me if you have questions, and yeah,
Awesome. Thanks again. And we'll chat soon. Okay.
thank you so much.